Yeah, one that's a wide screen up here. Oh, that's good if you want to see the screen.
Well, that way I can see the screen and they can see the speaker.
I heard they stole over. Let me read you this. This is fine.
It's just these two.
No, that's what I was. Like, you don't speak about it. Right now. Oh, Jason, you said you had some more.
I did not, this has been a morning.
It was a while, and I was on top of the roof along the drain piers. And before we drove down, they had, I just,
Yeah, bottom rung.
How was weekend?
It was good. Oh, sure.
Would you say short?
No, what about yours?
It was busy.
Is the car at your house? Keep being brave, they'll be here.
And what time is it? DC is February 12th and 17th. 12th and 17th. Just good. My baby's good. Just good. I said, no, I will not. Without that.
Oh, just the Bishop's office? Oh, okay, 1,008. Yeah.
You can go for the and then they can do whatever they want to do. And that's, we had, microphone is live.
Hello.
And all this been live stream. So, that's good.
Yeah, can we sign it? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Richardson, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Whit Gibson, the chair of the Scotland County Board of Commissioners. At this time, I'd like to call the meeting of the Scotland County Board of Commissioners to order. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? I have a motion by Commissioner Ivy and a second by Commissioner BJ Gibson. All in favor say aye. Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it. I want to welcome everyone here to the Emergency Operations Center. We are here today for a special presentation by the local Council of Governments in regard to broadband possibilities and study that they've completed and just to learn what they have done and what they're recommending for the future. Want to welcome, I know we have members from the school board and the city council here, and we welcome all of you, and most of our commissioners are here. We want to turn it over to David Richardson at this time and let him impart great wisdom to us. I think there's a sign-up sheet that he's probably going to make an announcement. I think he's going to start that around. If you have not signed that, if you would do so.
Thank you, Chairman Gibson. Good morning, everyone. I'm David Richardson, for those of you who don't know me, and it's my pleasure to serve as the Executive Director of your Lumber River Council of Governments. And we're delighted to have the opportunity to work with Scotland County, Laurinburg, Wagram, and Gibson here in Scotland County on regional issues. For those of you who don't know, we work on a variety of issues, everything from aging services to workforce development to community and economic services, planning services to our local government. And we've enjoyed a long partnership with Scotland County and the municipalities here. And we're so thankful for the support that we get from each of you for the work we do at the COG. We're delighted this morning to be able to provide some results to you about the broadband demand aggregation study that we've been conducting in our 5-county region. The study has been going on for about 1.5 years. We've been doing it through COVID, so it's had its challenges that I'm sure all of you have encountered in your daily operations as well. We know that broadband is a struggle throughout our 5-county area, and we really want to do the most we can to expand that broadband access and availability here within the region. Over the past 1.5 years with COVID, we've really learned all those challenges, all of those consequences, and really how important it is, from telemedicine to teleschooling. And with this study, we hope these will be the first efforts to help get you as elected officials and leaders within our communities the information and data that you need in order to make decisions to try to recruit broadband and support broadband within Scotland County. There's a lot of funding that's going to be coming out through the Great Grant initiatives and other programs through the bills that are coming through Congress and the General Assembly for broadband support. We're currently working on trying to get a training put together through the NC Bio Office, Broadband Infrastructure Office, to get some more details out to our members about that. We'll get that information to come out to you as well. We want today to be informative for you. Please feel free to ask any questions you've got. We're delighted that Jeff Brooks, who's been the consultant we've been working with ECC Technologies, is here today to do our presentation. He's going to talk with you, but we want this to be your opportunity to get questions that you have answered about broadband within the region. I will tell you, this is just part of the final result. We'll be getting to Kevin, to Charles, to the elected officials, to the school system, those who want a copy of it, a copy of the final report. We've got a draft of one component of it, and that draft is about 450 pages that we're going through. Now, that is for all 5 counties together. So the Scotland County parts are much smaller because ECC has been good enough to divide up a lot of the data on the county basis with the study, but we will be getting that over. We're anticipating having that final report where we can get it shared with all the GIS data and all the other information to you toward mid to late January. We've also been talking at the COG about ways that we can make that data more accessible. Some of you have heard about the portal we're developing on our website for our members with their water and wastewater issues. And we've already started some internal discussions about, can we use that to try to make some more of this broadband data available to our members for their utilization as well. At this point, I'm going to ask Jeff to come up and turn the morning over to him, and he's going to present the results of what we've seen so far. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Brooks. I'm with ECC. Thank you, David. Thank you, Sonia. Both David and Sonia worked really hard to help us get ready and allow us to be here this morning and meet with you. So I appreciate all the work that they've done. As I stand up here, I've been vaccinated and boosted, so hopefully I'm not endangering anyone in the audience. I appreciate the heat being on.
Can you stand closer to that mic because this is being broadcast and they will not hear you unless it's-
Can I slide it this way a little bit? Now, that could be bad because I could be rolling up and down the David's. So David and Sonia know that I do wander, so I'll try and be aware of that. So anyway, so as David said, any questions are welcome. And if I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't know the answer. And we'll get an answer back to you. I've got plenty of business cards to hand out. My contact information is at the end. So please feel free to ask your questions, call, write, email as it may be. So I was given detailed instructions on this, so we'll see. Yep. So the other thing that I don't do is I don't read slides. I hate to sit in a meeting and somebody read to me what I can read for myself. And I think you have it in front of you and you also see it behind you. Again, if there's something that is of particular interest to you, then just throw your hand up and we'll stop and we'll talk about it. So kind of the way that this presentation is laid out, I want to make sure that each of you have a very basic understanding of broadband, so that whenever we have conversations and you have conversations with providers, with funding agencies, at least you have the very baseline of what somebody may be talking about. So not going to be technical, not going to be in depth. I don't think I'm qualified to be technical or in depth, as case may be, but we'll use that to set the stage. We'll also talk about the scope of the project, what we are working on in terms of objectives for Lumber River and for each of the counties. We'll then drop into the inventory and infrastructure components. These are where our outside plant people actually went out into each of the 5 counties to look at the infrastructure that's available in each county. And then we'll talk about what your residents told us about broadband. We call that voice of the citizen, voice of the county. And it's whenever you take that information and you begin to overlay it and you combine that with other information, you start to at least get a picture of what the situation is within your county. Now, you, as the leadership within a county, you understand things like roads, sewer, landfill, health department, funding libraries, working with the Board of Education. You understand those things. They're complex and expensive issues that you deal with every day. And what's happening is broadband is becoming an increasing part of what you also deal with every day. And as I've said to most of our county clients, I would guess that either in person or virtually over the past year and a half, I've probably been in front of 100 counties. Prefers, you maybe can tell from my accent, to be in front of North Carolina counties, but I've been in front of counties ranging from Florida up to New York. When we have these meetings in front of county commissioners with county managers, or in other states that they call them county legislators, we begin to hear that most counties, rural counties, have exactly the same issues, exactly the same problems. You're dealing with education issues, you're dealing with economic development issues, or retaining businesses. You think in terms of small towns with their main street being boarded up. So you're having to deal with all these things. The fancy word is you're dealing in many cases with depopulation. In other words, to use real world, which I like to do, people move out because they think there's going to be a better opportunity somewhere else, maybe to raise a family or for work, for educational opportunities. You deal with, I'm trying to remember the word, economic disenfranchisement. In other words, many people in rural counties are poor. I grew up on food stamps, child support, free lunches in the school. So I speak that language. That's an issue for many of our rural counties, is how do you even get to a standard of living that makes sense for a resident in that county? We're dealing with healthcare. We're dealing with educational issues. The fundamental of all these things is that counties are facing increased requirements to deal with these issues, but the money doesn't always flow behind that. So now you have a situation where you're having to make decisions on how do I do more, providing services that cost me more to provide, yet the federal government or the state government may not be as forthcoming. And locally, I can't raise taxes, can't raise them much because we can't afford it. So broadband, I wish it would, but it doesn't solve all these problems. But broadband does create an opportunity to maybe tilt this game just a little bit so that you can begin to at least address some of these issues in a different manner than maybe we've done in the past. I think I'm just about through with everything. I'm probably about ready to take questions. So, I think I just said that. So this is the education part, and we'll do 4 slides in one. So really all broadband is the concept of getting data out of a computer somewhere else to your computer or your device. Broadband means we get it there faster. So if you go back in time, I've got a whole bunch of old visual aids in my attic, but I only bought a couple. Way back in time, this was from the mid to late 90s. This is nothing more than an analog modem, and it would move data around at 56,000 bits per second. So it's important to understand what a bit is and what a byte is. So my name is Jeff, Jeff, that's 4 characters. The computer folks like to sit there and say that a byte, B-Y-T-E, is about equal to a character. So my name is 4 bytes long. Okay. Reason why that's important is because that's how, whenever you say, hey, am I storing my photographs or files on a computer, on a device, it's generally recorded in characters. So you may have a picture that's 1 megabyte in size. It means it takes 1 million characters to store that picture. Have something that's 10 megabytes, is 10 million characters. But the way data moves is reflected in bits. And so you see these 1s and 0s up here. That's because computers are inherently stupid. A computer knows 2 things. It knows on and off because it's run by electricity. So it takes 8, I guess you say, instances of something being turned on or off, or bits, to make a byte. So my name might be, J might be, I don't know, 1010, and then E is 1011. The reason why that's important is because whenever you're looking at broadband and you're comparing it to other methods of moving data around, it's always expressed in megabits. How many millions of these little 1s and 0s can you move in a second? And broadband today is widely considered to be 25 megabits per second and up. Now that sounds like a lot. Sounds like a whole bunch. But remember, in the moving of all this data, you've got good old overhead. kind of like traffic, also kind of like directions. So if you think about driving your car on the road, you may be able to get on, 74 or 401 and just go straight until you hit traffic, until you have stop signs, until you have traffic laws, until you have things telling you which way to go. All those things clog up the transmission of data. And consequently, where you say, oh, Spectrum says I can get 200 megabits. Yeah, you can, but you know what? If you're lucky, you get that, but 150 megabits is getting sucked up and running the network, whatever else may be going on. So that's a great slide. So the next slide says exactly the same thing, except in a different way. And that says exactly the same thing in a different way. And now we're moving on to why we did this project. So fundamentally, what the COG did is they looked at what were going to be the economic drivers for the region. And they considered broadband to be one of those primary drivers. And so David and the board sat down and they said, let's make sure that we don't get left behind because there's an increasing amount of funding. Oh, I guess that's for me wandering, right? I'm sorry.
Slide that in your pocket.
Wow. Beam me up, Scotty, right? So we've done these types of projects in multiple counties. And so we believe that we had the degree of expertise necessary to support the goals that the Council of Government had, which is obviously what we're reviewing with you today. So I think I've got great slide, pretty picture. Am I doing something wrong now? Okay. So you can come back and look at that later because, again, I don't want to belabor pictures to you. 3 components to this project. We talked about this early on. It's taking a look at the citizens, the residents, what they're telling us. It's taking a look at the infrastructure. And it's also comparing this data to what the federal communications and other agencies are saying about broadband within the county. We'll talk about that in a minute, but that's a critical component of what we're looking at. Yep. When you see North Carolina Bio, that's the Broadband Infrastructure Office, just so you know. So what I want to talk about first is, let me ask this, are there any questions so far? Okay. So I want to talk about the components of a network. And what I tried to do was to compare that to where it made sense by thinking about transportation. We're all familiar, obviously, with the road system. So within building out networks, you're going to have a backbone network. The backbone carries the most traffic. It's the biggest part of the network. It's the highest performance, highest speed. So I sort of consider that analogous to an interstate highway. Then whenever you're maybe getting off that backbone, let's say you're getting into like a city, for example, you're getting into Laurinburg, or maybe you're getting into Lumberton or Rayford or something like that, you're probably not going to have that big highway anymore. You're going to have a smaller road, maybe a secondary road of some sort. So that's called a distribution network. It literally is taking signals that are coming from that backbone. It's beginning to distribute those out to different places where the network needs to go. And then whenever we get to the really small areas, like going to a neighborhood or serving an individual road, that's called a lateral network. Again, it's even smaller. And then you're going to have what's called a last mile or a drop or a last mile connection where I get cable or fiber or a wireless connection coming directly to my home or my residence. If you think in terms of fiber optics, fiber's made up of strands. And if you think about a backbone, there might be 144, 288, or even more strands of fiber in a fiber cable. Think about a distribution network, there may be 72, 48. Lateral, there may be 4, 8, 16, 24. Just to give you an idea of the magnitude in terms of the different components of the network. So what we did is we wanted to go and see what facilities were available. And there are 2 reasons why you do an inventory. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons, and there could be all kinds of justifications. But I believe, in my opinion, there are only 2 reasons. Number one, I want to know what exists in an area so I can identify gaps. I want to know where there are physical gaps in a given county. And the reason why I want to know that is because I want to sit down with my incumbent provider, whether it's a cable company or a telephone company, and say, look, I know you have your maps, I know you have your GIS files, I know you keep it all very proprietary, and I understand that, but we know where you aren't. And because we know that, we want to know what you're going to do to help close that gap. What can you do physically? What will you build? What will you invest in? And we'll talk about that toward the end a little bit about some of those strategies. The second piece of this is to be able to go to an alternative provider, somebody that's not your incumbent, and say, look, we got these gaps. We know where the incumbents are and aren't. We think we have an idea that there's some assets that you may be able to use. What would it take to have you come into our area and help us out? Now, as Charles knows, even that doesn't always work. I know he had a project a few years ago where they said, look, we want to expand some broadband, and we're going to roll the red carpet out for you. And the provider walked in on the red carpet, and they kind of hung out a little while. Then they turned around and they walked right back out. Very frustrating. And just between you and me, I know the provider, and the provider just didn't put in the effort that they should have put in. Now, at the end of the day, with all these providers, they have to be shown that there's going to be a return on their investment. So one of the things we do with our clients is we always sit down and we talk about the money, because you're spending your money, you're spending taxpayers' money, or you're going to get grant funds and you're expending those, or you're being an overseer of funds. But it helps if you understand the financials of your service provider, that you understand what it costs them to provide service, to build network, to operate on an ongoing basis. For example, provide 24/7 customer support for somebody who wants to call and hook their television up to their Wi-Fi network, $3 a month per subscriber. Just a rough industry average. But you have to take care of all these little calculations, run through those in your mind so you understand. So when you sit down with that alternative provider, say, look, I got an area that's got 25 homes in it. I got 25 homes, and it's $50 a month is what I'm going to build, and it costs me this to provision it, and this to serve it and support it. I have this many truck rolls. You do the same thing today when you think about running a water plant or running trash trucks or the equipment that's at your landfill. You're doing exactly the same thing, and that's what we want to always help you understand when you're having these conversations with service providers. So this map simply shows an overview of what was driven within the 5 counties. The way this process works is we will go out to each of the counties, and we would have come to Scotland County. My GIS manager, Jeff Holtman, would have spoken to you and said, can you give us GIS information? Give us map information. Any infrastructure that you have, we're happy to take a look at, and we make that the starting point. We then go out to other third-party providers that we've worked with in the past. We've been able to validate their data, and we buy data for the county from those folks, and we overlay it on the GIS data that you gave us. We then go to the FCC, and we take their maps, and we overlay it on top of the mapping data we've put together, and we devise what we call a drive plan. And that drive plan specifies where our outside plant people are going to go to see what assets, what fiber infrastructure there is in the county. Generally, fiber providers will follow the same routes. And you know what they are. If you go out and you look at a utility pole and you see a big, thick cable on it, you might go another few miles and you're going to see a second big, thick cable, because that route's already proven. The poles are in good shape. The easements are okay for someone to use. So we always expect to see people following the same routes, and the drive plans reflect that. The way the process works, the outside plant person will go to the starting point in the drive plan. They'll literally get out of their little car, they'll walk over and they'll look up at the fiber or look down at the pedestal, identify what the fiber is, try to identify to the extent possible who the owner is, get back in their car, drive about 300 feet, stop, do it again. When they're doing this, they have a big notebook and a whole bunch of colored pens, and they'll mark these maps up. And then they also have electronic devices. So with the electronic devices, they'll take a picture of it. It automatically records the lat long where they are. If there's a barcode there, they can scan the barcode and pull information off of that. So we have two ways in which we're gathering this data as we walk through the process. We do not go into incorporated areas. We will look, for example, let's say in terms of Laurinburg, we'll identify where fiber is coming into the city, and we'll identify where fiber is leaving the city. When you come into incorporated area, you literally are usually getting out of the truck and you're walking, especially in the downtown areas and more populated areas, and it's just not cost effective to do that. So this is an example. As you can see, these are just like a single page from 4 counties from the map books. And so you can see where they've scribbled up here and they've got different things colored. It's important to note that when they're driving these routes, one of the things that's most critical is to be able to look up or look down at a pedestal, look up and see an intersection. So if fiber's going this way and I'm expecting it to go that way, and then I see a splice point and I see new fiber or new cable, that's important because that infrastructure was not known to anyone before. So what will happen is we'll mark that point, and then the outside plant engineer will turn left and ride that fiber all the way down to wherever it terminates. Go this, whichever way it goes, we're going to note that down. And now whenever you get the GIS information back from us, because we'll return to you all the GIS information, you'll have all of the fiber routes mapped, including any new fiber that you weren't aware of. The only thing we don't do is we don't do the laterals. So for example, if I have fiber that goes to a neighborhood and I can see where that fiber is at the neighborhood, I'm not going to go into the neighborhood and drive it. We're looking for the availability of the infrastructure to support the expansion of fiber, not for whether each individual house has fiber or fiber connection or a last mile connection or not. Again, the reason why that's important is, and I'll make this up, I don't know. Let's say that we knew right here that we were saying there was no coverage here. But I might see that there's fiber here. So I'd go to my incumbent. If they own the fiber, I said, look, I see you have fiber here. What are you going to do? And, or it may be, I see there's fiber here that somebody else could use. Would you be interested in using that fiber? The reason why that's important is because if I'm trying to expand service into a new area and there's fiber there that's backbone fiber or distribution fiber, I don't have to take the time to build new fiber. It's already there. So I can go buy some of that fiber or rent some of that fiber, and I speed up my deployment rather than if I had to build all new fiber.
Are you making the assumption that if the fiber is coming to that neighborhood, that everybody in that neighborhood ultimately will be able to connect to that?
Yes. Yes. There are caveats there that we'll hit in just a minute, but yes. So when you look at the infrastructure, the first thing that you're thinking in terms of is, okay, how about my incumbents? And I have 2 types of incumbents. I have my incumbent local exchange carrier, or ILEC, and I have my cable TV or cable provider. So if you look within the county, what we're starting with is what are the territories that are covered by the incumbent local exchange carrier. So you can see in your copy, it's probably a little more visible than this, and in the full-size report that you'll get, electronic or otherwise, it'll be even more visible because these colors are a little mushy. But this looks like CenturyLink, Windstream, AT&T. So if you look at the next slide here, this is telephone company fiber. So if you see a dashed line, it's buried fiber. And if you see a solid line, it means it's aerial fiber. And it looks like AT&T's in the air here and here. And it looks like Windstream, maybe AT&T are underground in some of these other places. The other thing that you see is you see little dots that indicate the central office. The central office is nothing more than a building that's secure that's housing the computer equipment that runs the telephone network. It's going to have generators, battery backup, uninterruptible power supply, because the phone system for traditional analog phones powers the phone in your house. Unlike if you get your phone from cable TV or the new style phones where you have to provide the power. So what happens is the current telephone plant, copper base, what we call POTS lines, plain old telephone service, as that base shrinks, this becomes, rather than being the hub for your traditional telephone service, now it's becoming the hub for electronic services. The owners of these central offices are redeploying the central offices to support all the electronic equipment, all the data movement that we associate with voice over IP and other internet-based services. In some cases, there are telephone exchanges outside the county that are providing support to Scotland County. So these telephone exchanges don't always match up with county lines. So if we kind of step up and we're in the world of data now, let's talk about DSL, Digital Subscriber Line. It's a technology that's been around for about 25 years. So within the county, you can see where DSL is available. Now, DSL requires two things. Number one, a POTS line, an analog line powered by the phone company's central office equipment. And number two, it requires a decent amount of proximity to that central office because digital signals just can't go so far on copper wire. When you look at this, you're going to say, wow, look at that. 200 megabits, we talked about bits. 200 megabits right there and right there over DSL. It's not happening. That's what the phone company reported, but DSL will not support transmission speeds at that rate in Scotland County. They may do it in a lab where the units are this far apart, but in the real world, it just doesn't happen. Each carrier files with the FCC every 6 months what's called a Form 477, where they tell the Federal Communications Commission, these are the data services that we offer in Scotland County, and here's how fast they are. Here's how many megabits per second they are. And CenturyLink, or AT&T, but usually CenturyLink, is telling the FCC, oh, right here, look how fast we are. That would even be broadband speeds. Just doesn't happen. You can come back and you can read what the residents said in Scotland County. How fast is your service? It ain't that. I'm telling you right now, it is not that. There are a variety of reasons why things get reported like this, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But fundamentally, DSL is considered to be a narrowband service, along with dial-up, cellular hotspot, satellite. All those are considered to be lower speed services. And people in Scotland County are using dial-up, satellite, DSL. So the issue is, and we'll talk about this at the very end, think about content. Think about video education. Think about telemedicine. Think about these applications. These technologies are simply not robust enough to support those technologies. Not fast enough, so if you want to use that verbiage. But this is the starting point to say, where is DSL within the county? Looking at fiber, this is Spectrum's claimed coverage area, and this is their fiber. Now, the reason why, make sure I work this right, when you look at phone company fiber, cable fiber, what should stand out to you is that you don't see a lot of fiber from either the phone company or the cable company beyond these primary routes. So at some point in time, it's going to be what's called hybrid, where your data signals, whether it's you're on the phone, whether you're browsing the web, whether you're watching a movie, whether you're in class, are going to go from fiber over to copper-based carriers or technologies. Now, for coax, it's not quite as severe as it is with the telephone company. Twisted pair, which is what she's about the phone company, are very small wires, and their physical capacity to move data just isn't very high. Coaxial, by its nature, has more capacity, and consequently, most coaxial services are considered to be broadband. So just think in terms of that. Another thing that people ask us about, and we've done projects, relate to fixed wireless. And this is different from cellular, it's different from satellite. Fixed wireless, in essence, is putting a radio and antenna array on a vertical asset. Could be a commercial tower, could be a water tower, could be the side of a barn, whatever gets it up in the air, and broadcasting signals from that. Little receiver, and I looked for one last night, I couldn't find it. A dish goes on the house, might be about that big. Fixed wireless delivers broadband, probably anywhere between 25 and 100 megabits in what's called a multi-user environment. In other words, I have one antenna that might serve multiple people. Isn't bothered by rain, unlike satellite. No latency, unlike satellite. However, you got to have, in most cases, line of sight. Now, there's some frequencies that are used that are lower that don't require line of sight. Television is a great example. Cellular telephones are a great example where those waves will penetrate. But generally in the data space today for fixed wireless, the frequencies that are available to be used require usually line of sight. So here in Eastern North Carolina, we're famous for our pine trees. Pine trees not only present foliage issues, but also are highly reflective, which makes it difficult to push a radio signal through those trees to deliver broadband. Oh, but I guess I could. However, we identified these sites that could be used as part of a hybrid solution. And I know we had, when we did the meeting, I think it was a couple of months ago at Lumber River, we like to have different vendors come in and not talk about what they sell, but talk about the technology. We had Radwin as a provider of fixed wireless equipment come in and talked about their role as being part of a solution to deliver broadband. So if you look at these fiber assets, when you look at the map pretty close, I can't really point them out here because they all kind of run together. There are organizations that own fiber within the county that could be used as part of a broadband solution. So one of the things to think about when you look at this fiber and the applicability of fiber is if I'm building a fiber backbone network, I'm going to spend probably somewhere between $50,000 to $60,000 a mile to build that network. Now, it gets a little less expensive when I get down to the distribution fiber, a little less expensive when I get down to the lateral fiber. If you think about a drop or a last mile connection, I'd say on average for me to go from a pole to a house, maybe say 200 feet, probably $1,000. But I know in this area, Lumbee River EMC is one of our clients, for example, and they used to have some drops that were $4,000. So if you think about a $4,000 drop, divide that by $40 a month for service, you can see it's 100 months to recover just the cost of the installation, unless you were to bill the customer for it. But what customer can afford $4,000? One of the key things I want you to read when you get the report from David, I want you to read the comments. In every one of these reports that we do, we ask for respondents to say, tell Lumber River, tell Scotland County, what do you think about broadband? And you will consistently see, well, I called Spectrum and they said it was going to be $12,000 to give me fiber to my house. Who can afford that? Well, nobody can. Nobody can afford that. Now, one of the reasons why that happens is you will see somebody says, well, wait a minute. I see that big old cable right there, and here's my house, and I have maybe a 500-foot, winding road to get to my house and my barn. Why can't I get it? Because that's distribution cable. I've got to come all the way down here to the box where my electronics are to where I can hook you up. And now I have to come all the way back and pull fiber all the way back down here to take it back to your house. So I can't always just hit that cable and run it right here. There are otherwise some things involved. To me, it's important that you know these things and that even after we meet, if you have questions, call us. We'll help you any way that we can. We'll define things for you. We'll give you examples. We'll also give you resources that you can look at to learn more about this, because when you're in these conversations with these providers, you want to be as well equipped as you are when you're dealing with roads and sewer and those sorts of things. Because your constituents are going to say, well, I don't understand why this costs $12,000. So the more you know about why we think it costs $12,000, the better off you are to go and ask CenturyLink, you justify to me why it costs $12,000, especially when you're asking me for money. I got the wrong map there. I'm sorry. I will fix that and send that a revised one to Lumber River. There's supposed to be some census blocks up here. but we've got census blocks in one of the maps coming up. These are what are considered the underserved areas. Now, let me make a point about this. The FCC today is defining areas in each county that are considered to be unserved and underserved. Underserved is less than 25 megabits. That's the dial-up in the DSL and the hotspot in the satellite. Okay, unserved is I got no service. Unserved is not an adoption issue. It's not I can't afford it. It's not I don't know how to use it. Unserved means I can't get it. According to the FCC, this is all done by census block. If there's one house in a census block that's served, the entire census block is considered to be served. So if you have a scenario where right here, I'll use that as an example. Let's say those roads are indicating a census block, and one house in that census block is served, the whole census block is served. It doesn't matter that across the street, somebody can't get it. Yeah, that's unserved. I understand that. But, oh, no, that's served. So part of this, there are two pieces of this. Number one is whenever you're working on these issues, new grant guidelines are sitting there saying you can have up to 10% of a census block be served, and it's still considered to be unserved. It's still going to be eligible for grant money. And the other thing is, you're going to find whenever you apply for these or you're working with a service provider, the fact that you can go out into the county and say, hey, let me talk to you. Are you really served or unserved? Literally, we did some grant applications in northeastern North Carolina where CenturyLink challenged the applicant and said, well, no, we got this covered. You can't get a grant there. We literally went door to door and wrote down, and we had 550 some odd people said, nope, we got no service, and 2 said they had service. And we won the appeal because that's what it took. The primary work allowed us to get the money and contradict the FCC data. This map shows recent grant awards within the county. You'll see, for example, here, you'll see SpaceX. These are RDOF awards, Regional Digital Opportunity Fund. This program was in place about a year ago. It was a reverse auction that was performed by the FCC. And the way it would have worked is that, let's say this is a census block right here where I got the little remote control at. The FCC would have come and said, for that census block, we think it's going to take $3,000 to deliver broadband service to each residence in that census block. So I would have shown and said, great, I'd like that. I'd like to get $3,000 from you, FCC, to build network to provide broadband into that census block. Well, CenturyLink came over here and said, well, no, I can't let them come in there. I can do it for $270 because these were done in increments of 10% and it's reverse auction. So CenturyLink came in round number 2 and said, oh, FCC, we'll do it for $270. Windstream came over here and said, oh, we'll do it for $240. So now what happens is you either have an incumbent provider that is bidding down because they know they have the resources and the infrastructure, perhaps even contiguous service areas, where, oh yeah, anything we can get is better than nothing. So I'll do it for $200 or whatever it may be. You have an alternative service provider that's desperate for business, and so they're going to keep trying to get this grant because they think they at least can kickstart and get something going and then come back and be whole on the back end. The FCC said, you've got to build your network in 6 years. We'll pay you whatever you won per household over a 10-year period. We want to make sure you're going to stay in business that long. So these are the RDOF winners in the county over the auction that just ended. However, with all the ARPA money coming out and the infrastructure money coming out, there are some providers that are vacating their RDOF awards because the new awards that are coming out, the new flow of money that's coming into states and counties for broadband is less restrictive, less onerous for these providers. And so in some cases, they're vacating their awards, even willing to pay penalties. Now, so far, as of a couple of weeks ago, nobody in the county had vacated their awards yet. So what this means is that SpaceX is saying, you know what, we'll serve here and here and here, and that little bit there, and that little bit there, and the federal government's going to give us X amount of money in order to serve those areas. Yes, ma'am.
What metrics
part of before. I know the school system, we was recently contacted by AT&C to support a USDA Reconnect for Scotland County. So will there be any way for us to monitor duplication so we can work in tandem together?
So that's a great question. And the Reconnect Award, the Reconnect program's been around for about 3 years. It comes out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's about $1.2 billion over 2 years. But it was really the first national broadband program that came out following the FCC's CAF program. It's a very competitive award program. We've won 3 for clients, and they're now on the 3rd program that you're talking about. And the final report that we give to David we will give you an example of the federal data reporting requirements for Reconnect, just to give you an example of what the government looks for. We want to reconnect for Madison County in New York as an example, and it's about 800 hours worth of work for the ECC team, and probably a corresponding amount for the county, for Madison County and their service provider. So specifically to your question on the Reconnect or on other grants, the first thing that you want to do is to see, because I'm assuming that the service provider is going to look and say, hey, have we already been awarded? Is this a grant eligible area? Because if it's not grant eligible, they shouldn't even be bothering you. But part of what they do on Reconnect awards, there's a big part within those requests for data where they're saying, show us that you have support within the community. So if you got county support, Board of Education, community colleges, anchor institutions, banks, hospitals, libraries, that sort of thing. And all that goes into the application as qualitative components of that application. So you can do that. I'll be happy to send you some links. If you want to email me, I'll send you some links to show you where you can track that.
But I guess what I'm saying is that the school system, I know I can't commit my county or anything, but I want to make sure that I'm working in tandem with my county for what they do next. I want to make sure I don't do anything that will not cause us to have a strong application depending on what they do next.
So the question is, do you have like a broadband steering committee as part of the Scotland County government? Or do you have a cohesive city-county committee? Some counties do, some counties don't. And I think part of what David was going to do in working with the county was to make sure we're all galvanized together so that the right hand and the left hand know what's going on. And ideally, this data helps you in terms of being able to focus in some of those areas. Yeah.
Working on a digital inclusion plan that is being developed. Part of that plan, there's a list of stakeholders to be involved with that. Mark Ward shared a draft with me last week. Do you think the school system is one of those partners that are listed, Dr. Lorena? So Mark that information. And I will also tell you, part of